This is a reading from The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis. Chapter 3, on the teaching of truth. Happy the man who is instructed by truth itself, not by signs and passing words, Numbers chapter 12, verse 8, but as it is in itself. Our own conjectures and observations often mislead us, and we discover little. Of what value are lengthy controversies on deep and obscure matters, when it is not by our knowledge of such things that we shall at length be judged? It is supreme folly to neglect things that are useful and vital, and deliberately turn to curious and harmful things. Truly, we have eyes and see not. Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 21, John chapter 12, verse 40, Romans chapter 11, verse 8. For what concern to us are such things as genera and species? Those to whom the eternal word speaks are delivered from uncertainty. From one word proceed all things. John chapter 1, verse 3. And all things tell of him. It is he, the author of all things, who speaks to us. John chapter 8, verse 25. Without him no one can understand or judge aright, but the man to whom all things are one, who refers everything to one, and who sees everything as in one, is enabled to remain steadfast in heart and abide at peace with God. O God, living truth, John chapter 14, verse 6. Unite me to yourself in everlasting love, Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 3. Often I am wearied by all I read and hear. In you alone is all that I desire and long for. Therefore let all teachers keep silence, and let all creation be still before you. Do you, O Lord, speak alone. The more closely a man is united to you in pure simplicity, the more varied and profound the matters which he understands without effort, for he receives light and understanding from heaven. A pure, simple, and stable man, however, busy and occupied, does not become distracted thereby, for he does all things to the glory of God, and strives to preserve himself free from all self-seeking. And what harms and hinders you more than the undisciplined passion of your own heart? A good and devout man firstly sets in order in his mind whatever tasks he has in hand, and never allows them to lead him into occasions of sin, but humbly subjects them to the dictates of a sound judgment. Who has a fiercer struggle than he who strives to conquer himself? Wisdom chapter 10, verse 12. Yet this must be our chief concern, to conquer self, and by daily growing stronger than self, to advance in holiness. All perfection in this life is accompanied by a measure of imperfection, and all our knowledge contains an element of obscurity. A humble knowledge of oneself is a surer road to God than a deep searching of the sciences. Yet learning itself is not to be blamed, nor is the simple knowledge of anything whatsoever to be despised, for true learning is good in itself and ordained by God. But a good conscience and a holy life are always to be preferred. But because many are more eager to acquire more learning than to live well, they often go astray, and bear little or no fruit. If only such people were as diligent in the uprooting of vices and the planting of virtues as they are in the debating of problems, there would not be so many evils and scandals among the people, nor such laxity in communities. At the day of judgment we shall not be asked what we have read, but what we have done, not how eloquently we have spoken, but how holily we have lived. Tell me, where now all those masters and doctors whom you knew so well in their lifetime, in the full flower of their learning? Other men now sit in their seats, and they are hardly ever called to mind. In their lifetime they seemed of great account, but now no one speaks of them. Oh, how swiftly the glory of the world passes away. 1 John chapter 2, verse 17. If only the lives of these men had been as admirable as their learning. Their study and reading would have been to good purpose. But how many in this world care little for the service of God, and perish in their vain learning, because they choose to be great rather than humble. They perish in their own conceit. Romans chapter 1, verse 21. He is truly great who is great in the love of God. He is truly great who is humble in mind, and regards earth's highest honors as nothing. He is truly wise who counts all earthly things as dung, in order that he may win Christ. Philemon chapter 3, verse 8. And he is truly learned who renounces his own will for the will of God. Chapter 4, on prudence in action. We should not believe every word. Ecclesiasticus chapter 19, verse 16. And suggestion, but should carefully and unhurriedly consider all things in accordance with the will of God. For such is the weakness of human nature, alas, that evil is often more readily believed and spoke of in another than good. But perfect men do not easily believe every tale that is told them, for they know that man's nature is prone to evil. Genesis chapter 8, verse 21. And his words to deception. Ecclesiasticus chapter 14, verse 1. It is wise not to be over hasty in action, nor to cling stubbornly to our own opinions. It is wise also not to believe all that we hear, nor to hasten to report to others what we hear, or hear or believe. Take counsel of a wise and conscientious man, and seek, Tobit chapter 4, verse 19, to be guided by one who is better than yourself, rather than to follow your own opinions. A good life makes a man wise towards God, and gives him experience in many things. Ecclesiasticus 34, verse 9. The more humble and obedient to God a man is, the more wise and at peace he will be in all that he does. Chapter 5, on reading the Holy Scriptures. In the Holy Scriptures, truth is to be looked for rather than fair phrases. All sacred Scriptures should be read in the spirit in which they were written. In them, therefore, we should seek food for our souls rather than subtleties of speech. And we should as readily read simple and devout books as those that are lofty and profound. Do not be influenced by the importance of the writer, and whether his learning be great or small, but let the love of pure truth draw you to read. Do not inquire, who said this? Seneca, Epistle 12. But pay attention to what is said. St. Augustine on Psalm 36. Men pass away, but the word of the Lord endures forever. Psalm 117, chapter 2, or verse 2. God speaks to us in different ways. Colossians chapter 3, verse 25. And is no respecter of persons. Ecclesiasticus chapter 6, verse 35, and chapter 8, verse 9. But curiosity often hinders us in the reading of the Scriptures, for we try to examine and dispute over matters that we should pass over and accept in simplicity. If you desire to profit, read with humility, simplicity, and faith, and have no concern to appear learned. Ask questions freely, and listen in silence to the words of the saints. Hear with the patience the parables of the fathers, for they are not told without good cause. Chapter 6, on control of the desires. Whenever a man desires anything inordinately, at once he becomes restless. A proud and avaricious man is never at rest, but a poor and humble man enjoys the riches of peace. A man who is not yet perfectly dead to self is easily tempted, and is overcome even in small and trifling things. And he who is weak in spirit, and still a prey to the senses and bodily passions, can only with great difficulty free himself from worldly lusts. Therefore he is sad when he does so withdraw himself, and is quickly angered when anyone opposes him. Yet, if he obtains what he desires, his conscience is at once stricken by remorse, because he has yielded to his passion, which in no way helps him in his search for peace. True peace of heart can be found only by resisting the passions, not by yielding to them. There is no peace in the heart of a worldly man who is entirely given to outward affairs, but only in a fervent spiritual man.